Welcome, guys, to SpeakuP Monday Inspiring Humanity podcast, live stream. Call it whatever you want, right? It's two great guys having a chat today. And our guest today, I've just met him, and I heard him on the Clubhouse platform in a room that he runs, and just got such a great energy about him, and just his voice, and just like the person that I got the imagination he would be when I had a chat to him. It actually ended up being better. It was better than that. So Abraham Heisler, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you, my brother. And so look, as we know, SpeakuP Monday, there's three different versions. SpeakuP Monday, Destination Indonesia, that happens here, Tropical Nomad, 6:30 Monday, Bali Time, of course. And that's with a live studio audience. And then those great individuals who can't be here, like Abraham, who's in Portugal, right? We do this wonderful thing, but we do it via a live stream / podcast. And then finally, we do Clubhouse on Tuesday morning US time, Bali time, and Monday evening US time. And they're all different guests, so we don't just record one and just stream it all three. We do everything individually, but it carries that same sense of just authenticity and getting to know the guest a little bit deeper than you would normally get to. Right. So, first question for you, brother. Now, having met you via the online platforms, so what I love about your story is this monk meets entrepreneur, right? Honestly, I can't tell you how much I love that. I really do. You're going to hear me say it more than once. So, but can you give us a little bit of insight how this happened and how those two came to be brought together in you?
Yeah, 100%. First off, I like to say I'm the Jewish Jay Shetty. I think he's got a very similar story.
I love it. Jewish Jay Shetty.
And it's funny because I was actually just yesterday, for the first time since the pandemic, I went to visit my spiritual community, my yoga community that I got into over 22 years ago. And I was talking to one monk, and it's funny because when I first started my business, and I kept saying to people, I went from sleeping on the floor and living with monks to, under earning to turning my yearly income into a monthly income. And like, that was my story. And this one guy reached out to me, and I was living in the US at the time, and he's in Portugal. He reached out. He's like, why are you dissing monks? Like, come on, you were a monk. Like, why, and it, like, kind of playful, he's a friend. And I was just sitting with him yesterday, and we had a nice conversation around this. And it's all about context, really. So let me come back to that in a second. But basically, my journey is I grew up in New York City. Hip hop was my first love. I think you reached out and you said you liked my quote about from Woo Woo to Wu Tang.
Love it.
Right. And then around 19, I just, I watched the movie Powder, which was a film about a guy who had like abnormal abilities, and supposedly he uses 100% of his brain and turns to pure energy. And for me, that idea of realizing your potential and really living life to the fullest and like unlocking everything that the brain, body, mind and spirit can offer, like just really tapping your full potential, that really spoke to me when I was a teenager. And so I enrolled in this, spiritual community that, it was like an international yoga organization. This is before Lululemon, right? Before yoga was popular, especially in New York, or for like a teenager from New York, right? And I went down that rabbit hole for many years. It became something from, that went from being the periphery of my life to something central, very central within me. I lived with monks. I did an in-depth training. I traveled to India. I worked in Central America teaching meditation. I lived a monk lifestyle, although I never actually took the vows of being a monk. And then I decided, look, my mission on this planet, excuse me, must be something in the air. Hold on.
I know that feeling, by the way, the air conditioning.
It's not COVID. I was definitely what I was saying is, I was sitting on the back of a bus in Nicaragua. This is like, I was deep in my monk phase, and it just came to me that, my life's purpose is to inspire and empower people. And I thought, well, what's the best way to do it? I'm a very creative person, through hip hop. I was a rapper, I was a break dancer. I opened up for Busta Rhymes and Dave Chappelle. And I thought, okay, well, why don't I just combine it all and do film? And so I did. For many years, I was a filmmaker, but I wasn't able to achieve the level of success where I felt like I was fulfilling my mission. Like I was really inspiring people and empowering people. Yeah, okay, a little bit here and there. And I did some cool projects and I had, it was fun, but like, I just wasn't living to my full potential. And I realized there were certain things that needed to change. Like, yes, I could go deep into meditation and have powerful insights and realizations and things like that. But when it came to being in the world, there was 3 areas in my life that really suffered. One was I under-earned, right? I didn't have a relationship with money that really served me and my purpose. 2, my relationship with people of the opposite sex. Like I was never really in love. Like I never could attract a partner that could, like I felt on fire, my soul on fire being with this person. So my love life suffered, my sex life suffered. And then finally I had a little bit of health issues as well. And it wasn't until I started taking a look at, how I was suppressing certain aspects of myself, more like really to be super specific. Like I wasn't in approval of my worldly desires. And this is something that we find so much in spiritual and conscious community. It's like, it's all love, peace, rainbows, and chakra fairy dust. But we're not actually willing to look at some of the darker stuff within us, our relationship to money, our relationship to sex, and our relationship to power. And so I started going down the Tony Robbins rabbit hole, the personal growth work, the landmark forum type stuff, coaching, to really take a look at all the stuff that I was running from and avoiding in the world, and just sort of sublimating into some sort of spiritual ecstasy. And I started confronting my SHIT.
Yeah.
And so in that process, just to sort of wrap it up, in that process, that's where I launched my business. I became a coach. I realized like, this is it. This is what I was actually meant to do. And very quickly was able to scale to 6 figures. Of course, I had to hire a lot of coaches and a lot of mentors and do a lot of programs in order to really understand the mindset, the marketing and sales component of running a business. And just to bring it back to that conversation I was having with the monk, there's nothing wrong with sleeping on the floor. There's nothing wrong with having millions and billions of dollars. It's all about the story that we attach to those things. And so I think for me, what was really important is that if I want to inspire 1 billion people, which is really my mission, then sleeping on the floor and just hanging out and inspiring 3 or 4 people is not going to be my soul's purpose. I need to get out of that comfort zone. Like that was literally a comfort zone for me. The ashram was comfort zone. I had to get out of that and go down from the mountaintop into the marketplace and start over again as, as a beggar, right? As somebody, after 20 years of studying the mind-body connection, I had to all of a sudden learn a whole new skill and be a beginner once again. That was very confronting for me. And so it's all about, like, again, it's all about where you are, what you feel you're meant to do, and are you really living that truth, that purpose?
Well, man, well, thank you, brother. I get a much deeper insight into why you do it, and like there's a few questions that definitely come up. One was, why did you not take the vows of being a monk? And the other one, which is the second part to that question in a way, is, like some of the most darkest things that you faced, what were they, whatever comes up, and how did you overcome them? So vows of a monk, why didn't you take them? And then on leaving that ashram, you said you faced some really big challenges. The one that comes into your mind, what was it, and how did you overcome it?
Okay, so let's take the first one. Look, I believe in reincarnation, and I believe 100%. I've been a monk many times over, and I know because when I was 6 years old, I used to fall asleep. In order to fall asleep, I would pretend that I was a monk.
Wow.
Right? I would imagine myself being a monk and meditating myself to sleep. Like, what 6-year-old kid in New York City? Like, I don't even know how I was exposed to monks in the first place. So I know, like, that's always been with me, and it's like another conversation I was having yesterday, like a lot of people struggle with meditation, like to call out my wife, she lives with me, and, people think, oh, because she lives with Abe, she must know meditation. Like, she knows it, but she doesn't do it. It doesn't come naturally to her. For her, it's a giant effort and struggle. I don't get it. Like, I don't get how people struggle with meditation. For me, it's something that comes so natural. So again, like that monk lifestyle is here. It's a part of me. And the reason why I didn't take the vows in this lifetime is because I feel called to deliver in another way. Yeah. The organization or I would have taken vows in an organization where as a monk, I would have to practice celibacy. I'm very limited in how I can move in the world. So my organization, which is called Ananda Marga, is all about service, all about being in society and serving in society, and not like being a spiritual capitalist, just living in a mountain and just like hoarding information and spiritual awakening and not sharing it. No, we're all about sharing it. But still, even within that, there's a lot of like structure and there's like I'd have to play by the rules, right?
Yeah.
And I feel really called to, like, I'm all about discipline and structure and the masculine side of things, and that's why business has given me that sort of structure. You got to be disciplined in business. But there's I like bending the rules a little bit. There's a little bit of a Neo in the Matrix inside of me. So I decided 10 years ago, because I was really heavily considering I should just do this the rest of my life, I decided, no, I'm going to be a family person. So that's to answer the first question. We can dive deeper into that rabbit hole. But to answer your other questions about the dark night of the soul, I think, well, there's 2 times in my life that have been very challenging. One was my sort of awakening. So I was deep in my spiritual practice and spiritual community, and my first marriage was with a person who is an incredible person. Like, still to this day, a lot of love for this person, but I wasn't fully in it. And I was sort of like, well, on paper it makes sense, and we should, and my guru said, and we should do, and blah, blah, so like, it was a very intellectual decision, but it wasn't something that I felt in my body. And that was the beginning of my awakening, that this, like, just, everything could be sublimated into a spiritual expression, which is bullshit. It's like, that's a form of running away. And just to sort of veer off for a second and come back, when people experience trauma in their lives, or there's something very difficult or confronting, or like something that is very hard to confront in ourselves, we turn to something else, right? If we're not confronting, then we're turning to something else that helps to get our mind off of the trauma, off of whatever it is that we're running from. Now, the negative expression is a lot of people turn to drugs and alcohol, or just like mindlessly scroll on social media or Netflix or shopping or whatever it is, right? A more healthier way is to turn to spirituality, to go to church. Like, all that it's great, right? Those are good things, because it's a healthier expression. However, if it's all in avoidance of confronting our stuff, then we will always have a limited experience. Because the only fullness of experience is to move through the darkness, is to confront the stuff that we are running from. And if that doesn't happen, there's always going to be something missing. And again, just to come back to this whole spiritual community and conscious community, and I'm sure in Bali, you probably come across a lot of people in this type of community. A lot of us, we turn to yoga and the meditation and the positive vibrations because there's so much stuff that we're running from, and we're not actually confronting. And so my awakening was 10 years ago. I was in this marriage, and I was like, wait a second, why am I having panic attacks? Why am I having, anxiety attacks? Like, this should work, right? Like, this should be fine, but I'm not fine. Like, there's something inside of me that's saying, no, like, this is not it. This isn't my life. And I had to reconcile my sort of thoughts and ideas at the time versus what I was really feeling. So that was a very difficult period, but it was a very good thing for me to go through, because it really woke me up to what else was possible. I feel like that's a good place to stop. I can go on, and there's other stuff there, but I want to hand the mic back to you.
Yeah, oh, good, my brother. Thank you. The follow-up question here, we're going to go deeper, not too much deeper, but how did you do it? How did you do it? So I get the internal conflict, that the panic attacks and everything else was driving you, drawing towards something, but then how did you get from there to what, leaving your marriage? Like how did you, that bit there, that's a bit, yeah.
Well, it wasn't easy. I was a bit like Hamlet in that I kept equivocating, right? Pontificating. I kept going back and forth and vacillating. Part of that is being a Libra. I don't know, Robert, if you ever experienced that, that indecisiveness. So here, let's get deep, man. Like, I don't want to hold back. Do I have permission to just like
you have
bring it
all
full
permission,
on out?
brother. You have all permission.
I appreciate you. So here's the thing. Okay, I'm gonna like veer way off course and come back.
Love it.
There was a study that was done through Harvard University in I think 2016, where they took a look at people in a business executive program, and what they found was that the executives, the business professionals that were in leadership positions, that were higher up, that were driving business forward, they had a certain like a chemical ratio going on in their physiology that enabled them to be successful. And that ratio was exactly this. It was high levels of testosterone and low levels of cortisol. All right? Say that one more time. High levels testosterone, low levels cortisol. Now, a quick little note. This is not just for men, because women also produce testosterone in their ovaries. But what's really interesting, normally we think, oh, too much testosterone, it's like beating on the chest and over aggressive and caveman and whatnot. But actually what that is high testosterone, high cortisol. So when you have all this like testosterone energy and a lot of stress, then yes, you come across as aggressive and crude and crass, right? But high testosterone produces energy. It allows you to take on more risks and to be more leaned in. It's actually a really good thing specifically for men, but also for women to sort of look at this sort of study. And the reason why I'm bringing all this in is because typically, as a spiritual person, as a monk kind of yogi kind of dude, I was very passive, right? I was very, very passive. So not assertive, definitely not aggressive, very passive. And as a result, so basically I had low cortisol because I meditated a whole lot, but I also had low testosterone. And because of that, I was unable to really confront and to move into very difficult spots and difficult places. So I engaged in a lot of codependent relationships, not just with my partner that I was talking about, but codependent relationships with friends, with coworkers. I was never able to move the needle forward in my film career because I wasn't embodying what's necessary to take drastic action, to show up, to be bold, to really to take risks, to be assertive, right? And sometimes aggressive. And here's the thing, here's the kicker. I was so afraid of having a negative impact. Like I was like a social Jain, traditionally, like going way back, in India, the Jain religion was all about this philosophy of ahimsa, meaning no harm. I don't want to harm anything. And they would take it to such an extreme. They would wear masks. They would sweep the floor in front of them so as not to step on any organisms, right? But you can't really, it's very difficult to live in the world and be super successful and do everything that you need to do in the world if that's how you're living your life, constantly worried of making a negative impact. And again, in the spiritual community and the conscious community, we're so afraid of having a negative impact that we end up not having a positive impact. Yeah. Because according to the law of polarity, right, the law of polarity is for every action, there's an equal opposite reaction. So for every person that I inspire, like whoever's watching this and really resonating, like, wow, Abe's really bringing the truth. And Robert, for every person, there's going to be another person who's like, I can't get down with Abe, right? No, I'm not a fan of Robert. And I was so afraid of having those non-fans that I wouldn't even stand up and have those pro fans.
Wow.
Right? And so I ended up becoming this zero impact person, this zero impact man. And so, to come back to the point around what happened in my relationship, it took years. Like we got married. I mean, even before getting married, I was ambivalent. And then we got married and I was still ambivalent. It took even like 2 or 3 years after that for me to finally come to a place where I was like, okay, this isn't working. And for her as well. And it's like, I look back and I'm like, wow, why did it take so long? And the reason being, just to get crude for a second, But then to bring it back to the Harvard study, I wasn't owning my balls, meaning I wasn't tapping into the energy that the testosterone that the testicles produce. So when people say like own your balls, it's like, or like have cojones, what they're saying is produce more of that hormone in your body, because that hormone, again, puts us in a place where we're more open to taking risks. We're more assertive with ourselves, right? We have more energy flowing through our body. We're not tired or depressed or anxious. We're worried. We're just more confident is really what it comes down to. Wow. So that's just sort of like a psychological plus a physiological, look at what it takes to really stand up and to be confrontational.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, man. Like, there's so many insights popping for me. That's incredible, Mamma mia. But the question is then, so then how do you live in the world now? Because you're saying came from that life, being trained as a monk, having past lives as a monk, the zero impact, the realization that, hey, if I have zero impact, then I'm running away, I'm hiding, I'm not confronting anything, so now I do need to step up. I need to kick some heads, not literally, but I need to get up. I need to move, right? So then now, how do you marry those two together, if they can be married together?
100% can. And in fact, here's the craziest thing. My spiritual tradition, it evolves out of Tantra. And the original meaning of the word Tantra, now in the West, many people, they hear Tantra and they think sex. And yes, there's like tantric sex practices for sure. But really Tantra is all about confrontation. Ooh. It's about awakening to your true nature through the process of confrontation, because Tantra sees everything as an element of God, right? As divine, as consciousness. And so the question is, how can we turn everything, every single aspect of our life, including sex, into something that is going to help us to realize God in our lifetime? And so the reason why I got involved with Tantra in the first place is because I was always attracted to showing up and facing your stuff, right? That spiritual fight and being a bit more aggressive, because I traditionally, we're going back, but like I grew up in an environment where, my father, I love my father very much, but like, during the 60s and the 70s, he was a good dude, right? And so he marched in Washington, he was part of the civil rights, he was part of, the anti-war movement. And he was also very supportive of the liberation of women. But as a result, it's almost like throwing out the baby with the bathwater, because him and millions of other men who wanted to be supportive, wanted to be forward thinking, they got rid of their masculinity or the positive aspects of masculinity, which involved being more assertive and involved being more of, taking on more of that king archetype. But if that's seen as chauvinistic, then of course we're going to move away from that and then become more of this sort of like passive, like it's okay, just go with the flow kind of archetype. But then shit doesn't get done. So I'm getting really off track, and I completely lost track of the question. But
no,
bring me back real quick.
I've got your track, man. So what we're talking about is how you bring those two together. Like you got the spiritual side, and then you got the other side. And you said that Tantra bridges a gap between being like a monk and an entrepreneur in a way.
Well, here's the thing, and this is really my greatest love is. It is, and you've heard me mention this before, but spending a lot of money, like playing with your money story, because you and I met in a room where we were talking about changing your money story, the alchemical process of transmuting your money story. And I refer to that as financial ayahuasca. Because when I first hired my coach, her program was $100,000. I was earning $30,000 a year at the time, right? So I had to like go on this big leap of faith that I was going to be able to shift my mindset and my brand and everything, be able to make enough money to pay my coach, but then also to live and to get the result that I wanted. And it sucked. Like it really sucked, right? And so I did end up building a 6-figure business, and I did end up getting the result. And it was a lot of waking up in the middle of the night, like throwing up, right? And confronting my stuff. And so I'm really interested and fascinated in using business and using our relationship with money as a means for awakening. Because those energies, like the energy of money, sex, and power, are very alchemical, which is why you look at books like Think and Grow Rich, and they talk about the transmutation of sexual energy. It's very alchemical, and it's very hard. Like, it's very difficult, challenging energy to work with, and you can get burnt by it. Like, so many people are burnt by what happened to them financially, what happened to their parents financially, what happened sexually. We see so much abuse happening, you know, in the realm of sex, right? All these sex scandals, power, so much corruption and abuse of power. And so dealing with these energies it's almost like it takes some sort of transcendental experience to be able to work with the energy without getting burnt by them. And in some ways that you kind of do have to get burnt by them in order to be initiated into the ability to work with these energies. But once you develop the thick skin, it's almost as if like it's a spiritual process. And then when you can get to that ideation where you see everything as just a transference of energy, and you're not attached to the swings of like, are we doing good in business? Are we doing bad in business? And swayed back and forth. Like I tell my clients all the time, you know, if you're like I'm happy and grateful if one of my clients, you know, lands a big deal or a contract or whatever. And I say to them, this actually came from my coach. I say, your client's going to get served, right? That whoever's on the other side of that contract, that's a big win for that person. But for you, you shouldn't get all tied up and attached to the ups and downs, because that's a worldly experience. And so today you're excited, but tomorrow you're going to be depressed. So it's much better to continue to allow whatever is happening here, the constant swing back and forth and the rhythm. And I mean, I'm invoking universal principles of the universal law of rhythm, which basically says that, you know, what's up today is down tomorrow and vice versa. We have to do the work of going beyond that to a point where no matter what's happening in my business, no matter what's happening in the world, I'm coming at it from a different perspective. Now, that doesn't mean running away from the experience of reality of life. I can have all the feelings, but my mindset, I need to develop what's called objectivity. And science shows that you can actually do that through the process of meditation. We'll leave that for another time. I have to develop this objective sense. So the last thing I'll say, and I hope it's not too intellectual, but my teacher, my guru used to say, our path is a path of subjective approach through objective adjustment, which for me means that subjectively, right? Subjectively, we're moving towards God, basically, right? We're moving towards truth. We're moving towards that sense, that understanding that everything is a manifestation of love. However, we have to have this objective adjustment. So we develop the limbic system, which is the part of the brain that processes emotions, right? Meaning that we express our emotions and we're in approval of our desires, the sex desires, the money desires. We're in approval of this stuff. But we also have that prefrontal cortex, this conscious mind, that's responsible for the objectivity of it all, realizing that everything is an interplay of energy and God, and we are just channels for this interplay, but we can be in it but not of it, if that makes sense. So there's a lot that plays into it, and yeah, I'll give you the mic because I don't want to keep talking all day, but you can see it gets deep. Yeah,
look, for me, I'm having the best time listening because like that is like I don't really actually have words for it. Like that's beyond. Like it's such a great explanation. And I capture the heart of it, right? Which is, you know, this interplay between, you know, the monk, the entrepreneur, you know, not playing into, you know, big deal, small deal, not letting that affect you, knowing that the customer on the other side is being served. You're almost in a way, you know, like focusing on the process of your development spiritually through that filter of business and money. and like you're not really focused so much on the outcome. You pay attention to the outcome, but it's not your be all and end all, because then you're stuck in that world, which means that you're very high when you got a great deal, and then when you go, and then when it's not going well, you're like, oh man, what have I done? I'm thinking about the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Jeez, whoa.
Let me interject one thing.
Yes.
The book that's had a very powerful influence in my thinking is a book called The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Wattles, which was a book written over 100 years ago, part of the New Thought movement, and also the book that the movie The Secret's based on. Now, The Secret is a movie that gets very misinterpreted, but there's a lot of truth to that thread of thinking. And my favorite quote from within that book, the author Wallace Wattles writes, what did he say? To think what you want to think is to think truth regardless of circumstance. Now, the way that I interpret that is with the understanding that whatever's happening, like the truth of the matter, it's not, we can use circumstance as objective evidence to understand where I'm at. Like, hey, is this process or this strategy effective in my business? Yes or no? I could look at the results and I can find out. But that doesn't hold a candle to my subjective experience. So if my subjective experience is tied up with what's happening externally, well, then I'm screwed. No clients, oh, I'm a bad person, I suck as a coach, I'm a terrible business person, I shouldn't be doing this, right? Because I'm subjectively involved. However, if I'm always in that sort of God consciousness, and it's impossible to always be there, and I wanted to say this earlier, I still wake up as the beta male, passive, people pleaser, nice guy. Like every morning, that's who I wake up as. Yeah. Okay? Like, so do not ever think that, oh, Abe's achieved this level where he's not that anymore. Like cancer's in remission. No, I wake up with the cancer every single day. However, I've developed a mindset and routines, tools, and protocols to step into a more powered version of myself. And I have to do it every single day. And if I don't do it, then I'm just people pleasing all the way through, right? So that's really important. And then just coming back to that point of, I always have to remind myself that I am God, you are God, everything is God, right? And that nothing will ever change that, right? I am whole and complete and abundant right now in this moment, and there's nothing that I need externally. In fact, everything I want is already here, right? Everything I need is already inside of me. As long as I can maintain that and to think what I want to think, which is to think truth, regardless of what's happening in the circumstance, then I can create my circumstance according to my will, my desire, and my design, rather than by default, which is coming from an unconscious place.
Yeah. Whoa. Then that question is, and this has many roots, but whatever comes up for you is that, so how do you show somebody that? Because it's not really teach, right? Because it's something that all of us have already, but we maybe, as we discussed, maybe there's certain stories from your past, from your childhood, which are skewing your view about money. Or maybe there's certain things that have happened to you recently, even though we know the 0 to 7 is a key time, but we're being then dominated by unconscious thoughts. So then how, or maybe a couple of tools, how are you able to bring people into that present day awareness of the God within themselves that they are a part of, and we're all part of it, we all are that, to a point where they can then see and create their lives consciously?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent question. So this is really the basis of my brand, which is called Internal Leverage, which is really all about being able to tap into those internal states, the mindsets, the consciousness, in order to leverage that and basically affect our external reality, right? To be more intentional with our life and our business. And so there's two ways that I can mention. One is psychologically, by replacing our inner self-image, right? By giving a new idea, having a new idea to contemplate. So, for instance, Les Brown talks about it's possible. It's possible that I could become a millionaire. It's possible I can have the love of my life. It's possible that I can have the perfect shape, body, health, and energy. So first is by introducing the idea that it is actually possible. Now, what happens is we have what's called the critical filter, which separates the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. And it's developed at the age of 7. And I like to call it the what you're talking about Willis filter, right? Because if we're trying to implant an idea like, I'm rich, there's that part of the brain that's like, what you talking about, Willis? You got like $100 in the bank account. You ain't rich. You know what are you talking about? Like, this is bullshit. So, so what we have to do is there's 2 things. One, we have to introduce those ideas when that critical filter isn't present. And so things like meditation, which enters the mind into a alpha theta state, which is where the unconscious and conscious become blurred, right? That line becomes blurred. Hypnosis also dissolves that critical filter. Working with a coach, working with a mentor, working with somebody who can help identify blind spots and sort of put you in a place through induction, whereby you're now tapping into that person's idea and energy and their own consciousness and the work that they've done on themselves. And that's being transported from that person or from that group of people, from that environment to you. This is also another way to get these ideas in and have them land in the subconscious mind. Now, this can only really land in 2 ways. One, if we get emotionally attached to it, right? So we have to think this new idea and really bring our emotion into the mix. It can't just be like an intellectual experience, because that's only the prefrontal cortex. We got to get the limbic system and the brainstem involved as well. And then the other is through repetition, okay? It needs to be repeatable after time. So if a person starts thinking in a new way, first they change their environment and they have that reinforcement, right? And they're working with a coach, a powerful mentor, and a community to actually bring themselves into the field of what it's like to actually be successful in business, and that business is easy, this new idea, then they have to start taking action. Once they take action from this place, they start seeing the results, right? They start building that 6-figure business. All of a sudden, they reach 7 figures in their business, in their income. And all of a sudden, the unconscious mind starts rewriting. But you still have to be careful, because it's very easy to fall back, which is something called the upper limit. And you look at people who win the lottery, they make a lot of money, but because they haven't done the work to reinforce that I'm actually a millionaire, they go back to being who they were, if not a worse off financial condition than before, right? So what I'm explaining here is the process of reprogramming. It's also neuroplasticity, which is where we can actually rewire the neurons, the neural networks in our brains. But what I really want to point you guys to, because any sort of neuroscientist or mindset coach can talk about this, but what a lot of people aren't talking about, which I'm really interested in, is what's happening on a physiological level. So we know about neuroplasticity that's happening in the brain, but physiologically, the neuroanatomy, what's really interesting is that, like, so for instance, I'll preface this by saying I was doing a lot of this work. I paid my coach. I, was trying to reprogram my subconscious beliefs and thoughts, but I still kept coming up against this wall. Yeah. And I realized that, it's one thing to do all the psychological work, but if my body is not feeling energized, if I don't have that testosterone pumping, if I don't have other hormones like serotonin, which is the mood boosting hormone, and the endorphins and the anandamide and norepinephrine and all this type of stuff moving through my system, I can't perform in a peak way, right? I'm going to default to that guy that I wake up as. So the thing that's really helped me and helped to unlock this entire process and fast track it is the process of breath work. Okay? Breath work is one of the most quickest ways to bring somebody into a state, which is where their prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for analysis and rational decision making, but overstimulated, could also be responsible for the overanalysis and the inner self-criticism. Oh, I'm not good enough, I can't do it, so on and so forth, right? Breath work slows the prefrontal cortex down so that we can tap into and leverage other parts of our brain, like the limbic system, where our emotions are stored. So it's kind of like if you have a bottle and that prefrontal cortex, that brain that we're using every time we go out and we move through the world is basically, it's the cap, right? Our conscious mind is the cap of this bottle. And we have so much kind of bottle, there's a lot of kombucha in here that wants to just explode, right? So what we have to do through breath work, through peak experiences, is take that cap off. And when we do, all of a sudden, everything that we've been pushing down and spending so much energy suppressing, our wants, our desires, our fears, our anger, all that stuff that we haven't been confronting, all of a sudden it bubbles to the surface. As long as we allow it to, right? We have to be in a place of approval of our experience. But when we can do that, when all of a sudden everything comes out of the bottle, we are this clear channel. So all of a sudden, this hard mindset work that everybody, you know, it's really hard to do, right? Or at least there's this idea that it's hard to do. All of a sudden, it becomes a whole lot easier because we're actually shifting our physiological state.
Wow. And then as you mentioned, you know, it's that's like the blank canvas in the forum. That's like shifting all of that stuff out, which is now empty, and now you can basically put in what you want. So now you can reprogram yourself, right, into the
100%.
Got it. Wow.
Yeah.
And is there a breathwork exercise that you could show us now, like 30 seconds, like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, like a breathwork exercise that you could use?
Yeah. I mean, there's various different protocols that I employ with my clients, but the one thing I can say is that, you know, most of the time we're breathing very shallow into our chest.
Yeah.
And so two things. One, we want to breathe through our nose as much as possible throughout the day. And there's all sorts of studies and research and science around that, the reason why that's beneficial for our energy and our mental clarity. But the other thing I would say is that we want to activate our diaphragm. Okay. And making sure, so right now, if you were to place one hand on your chest, one hand on your stomach, and if you were to breathe, just breathing through your nose, and you want your lower hand to move as you breathe, right? And you want to take like 30 breaths, just like that. So you keep doing that. And this is like Wim Hof does this all the time, right? You breathe into the stomach, the chest, release, and then hold out for a little while, because there's, you know, a relationship between your ability to tolerate carbon dioxide and your performance and energy levels. If you do that breathing every single morning, you don't need to drink coffee. You can show up in a place of alert where you're aroused. Like, we drink coffee because we're like groggy and we're not alert, calm, and ready. And so we drink coffee to get ready. But the problem is we're relying on an external substance. Now, a little bit of caffeine is cool, but most business people, a lot of business people, they rely on coffee to get through their day, right? Yeah. One cup, they crash. Another cup, they crash. And we're constantly doing this like spike. So kind of like I was talking about before with I get a client, I don't get a client, you're on the roller coaster. So first we talked about getting your mind and body, your spirit off the roller coaster. Now we're talking about getting your body off the roller coaster. Because again, you don't want to be subject to your circumstance. You want to be dialed into the version of yourself, your energy, your health, your body, but also your financial situation, your relationship. Like, you want to come from a place that is internal leverage, as opposed to just being a sort of victim of circumstance.
Love it. And look,
so
yeah, go on.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
You're good.
Interrupt me.
Look, I can talk to you for hours. Now, I'm looking at the time. I reckon we're getting close. So there's definitely two more questions. One question, really. But before we get there, which leads off beautifully from where you just left off. Now, with that breathing, so you got one hand chest, one hand stomach. So in through the nose, and then out through the nose or out through the mouth?
Yeah, okay. So throughout your day, when you're not doing breathing protocols, you want to be breathing through your nose. When you're doing breathing protocols, in and out. Okay? When you're doing breathing protocols, breathing through your mouth is okay. So it depends. I would say breathing through the nose and out through the mouth. Yeah. And if you want to bring in more air, more oxygen, you can do that with the mouth. But that's a bit more of an intense process. Got it. So in through the nose, then stomach first, then into the chest, then out through the mouth. So in, stomach, chest, mouth. Okay. Yes.
Got it. Wonderful. And look, again, man, I love talking to you, man, and I'm looking forward to working with you too. And but when I was looking at you a little bit online, you had this incredible video, and it was about how you can, remain in the center of your existence, and others' situations, circumstances orbit around you, as opposed to you being taken by them. Right. Yeah. And it just hit me that way. I'm like, God dang, that is good. So I think it would be really great just to, spend some minutes just explaining that to people here. I think they'll find it really helpful.
So I'm a big fan of universal laws, which are principles that are found in all the major religions, Hermetic philosophy, a lot of mysticism, but also apply to science. So like, before I talked about the law of polarity, Newton's law of, every reaction has an equal opposite reaction. Like, it's all the same stuff, right? So we find a lot of correspondence between physical laws and psychological laws, like just human dynamics, what's happening between people. And one of my favorites is this law of, I don't even know what the name of the law is, but, basically in science, any sort of object that has more mass is going to create a gravitational field, right? The law of gravity. And so what happens with that gravitational field is, like, let's say I have two objects, right? And, okay, so this is bigger, right? So let's say this has, more mass and it's floating in space. Now this becomes an orbit and it starts circling around this one. Yeah. But, it's not just about size, right? It's also about density, which is really what we're getting to in a second here. So let's say I have a tiny little, smaller object, but this is super dense. All the particles are really tight. It's like, the most dense metal and heaviest metal that there is. All of a sudden, this creates the sort of like the impression on the time-space fabric, and now this larger object is revolving around this thing because it has the highest density. So what's really interesting about that is that if you look at confidence, you look at confident people, really, where does confidence come from? It comes from our belief. And so if I'm really confident and really believe in something or believe in myself, all of a sudden I create this magnetism around me. I can enroll people. I become an excellent salesperson, whether I'm selling an object or I'm selling a service or I'm selling an idea. Like, look at somebody like Steve Jobs, who was like, he was like a tyrant, working with the man. But look what he was able to accomplish because he just believed so firmly, right? And so what happens with our beliefs is that when when we're not very confident, we're in that sort of beta male, like nice guy, people pleaser, our confidence is very sort of vaporous, right? And so we end up getting pulled into other people's fields, other people's orbits, because we don't have that much density. And so our job, and this is really the power of the alchemical process of working on your mindset, our job is to develop that confidence such that all of a sudden our belief system becomes super dense. So that maybe we're not like loud and obnoxious or anything, but we're just so clear and so powerful and so certain within ourselves that it's magnetic, right? We see this all the time in human interaction. We see people who step into a room, people are like, who's that person, right? Who's she? Who's he? And look at a famous person who steps outside of, steps off onto a red carpet. Photographers, paparazzi, people like constantly just circulating around this person because they've done that work. They've gone through that process. The last thing I'll say, the reason why this applies so much is because I've worked with a lot of clients who, even though they're successful, they're still running after something external to them. And so they're constantly circulating around this idea of success or trying to serve their clients or but they're not really coming from a place of power within themselves. So I take them through what I call the reverse Copernican shift, because Copernicus was the person who said, wait a second, the sun's not revolving around us. We're actually just, a body of mass orbiting in space revolving around a sun. It's a paradigm shift. So the reverse of that is to go back and say, wait a second, I'm not just like some dude chasing after fame and success and clients. I'm the sun. I'm the center of my universe, of my solar system. And so my life all of a sudden now begins to revolve around me. Opportunities revolve around me. And I don't have to run so hard and burn myself out. I can just be in my power, in my confidence, in my energy, and look at all the opportunities that exist around me to see where I can serve, to see where I can be of benefit, to see where I can be in alignment, right? So that's really what it's about. It's about being in alignment. And when you're tapped into that universal energy and consciousness, there's no greater confidence that exists.
Love it. And this is probably the toughest one. Not really. So is there a method or some part of that method that somebody who's watching now could start to explore that, or take something away, like the hand on the stomach, focus themselves in if they're getting a little bit heady to get back into their body? Is there any sort of process that they could do to kickstart that Copernicus method?
What I would recommend is to get into your car, if you have a car, or get into a quiet room where there's nobody home. And I would recommend just breathing, taking some deep breaths in, hand on the chest, hand on the stomach, breathing to your abdomen, closing your eyes, and allowing yourself to, number one, let go of all of the feelings of lack, the feelings of limitation, the sense that I can't do it, I'm not good enough, all that type of stuff. Just start letting them sort of roll off of you, or any sort of manifestation of that's showing up in your life. And I want you to really tap into the energy that exists within you. Because, you look at the Eastern traditions, the martial artists, the Dantian, which is our center of gravity, is our abdomen and, everything that's below the chest, basically. That part of the body is our center, is our power source. So you want to start feeling into your desire. You want to start feeling into your power. You want to start tapping into your sexual energy, your root chakras, your sacral chakra, like all of the energy that exists down there. And as you breathe, continue to breathe, allow that energy to come up throughout your body. See, we spend so much time keeping that energy down to be civilized that we don't allow it to express ourselves. So I want you in this moment, if you're listening to this, to breathe, hands on the stomach and chest, feel that energy, bring it out to the body. And if you're doing this properly, you should feel this power surging inside of yourself and this like desire to just scream. This is why I want you to be in your car or in a place where nobody's home. And I want you to feel into that and allow that energy to move through you. And then when the time is right, just express it in whatever way. For guys, I find that just letting it out, just freaking yelling and just letting that scream out, it stirs a lot of dudes. Women like to move, right? They like to dance. So feel that, breathe in such a way. And then when you feel that power come through you, express it in whatever way feels right to you, whether it's letting it out and just a yell, a scream into a pillow. I do this all the time, and this is probably the most powerful technique I can do with somebody to give them a state change in a very short amount of time. If you're a woman, dance it out, right? Move your body, move your hips, feel your sex, feel your power, and know that it's powerful, it's divine, and you can accomplish anything.
Wow.
That's your starter kit. Obviously, there's a lot more. You're not going to become a millionaire that way, but that's going to move the needle forward and get you to feel what we're talking about here in our conversation today.
Man, Brother Abe, now look, how can people contact you, man? Because you've given some explanations that I've never heard before. And I love that, man. I love you anyway. Like, again, like from the moment I heard you on Clubhouse, I was like, something about this guy, I'm so glad we got a chance to talk. I hope we can go do it again and go and just move, because there's so much that you bring. I think it's amazing. And just, the people that can be impacted powerfully and positively as a result of what you teach, I think is without limit. So please, man, how can people get a hold of you? What's the easiest way?
Best way is my website, heislercoaching.com, HEISLER coaching.com. I have a free breathwork training with guidance and an animated video that my wife did. She's a 3D animator, works in Hollywood. And so she did a video animating the breathwork. So download that. It's completely free. Other than that, I'm on Instagram as Abe Heisler and on Clubhouse as Abraham Heisler.
Beautiful, brother. And look, what we do as well, we request our guests to finish the show with just maybe a reinforcement of something that they've wanted to say but didn't get the opportunity, or something that just pops in as something to end the show with, so people can maybe just mull upon something, or just imbibe something, or just let something go. So I'll give you 30 seconds to think about that. In the meantime, guys, so you've been watching Abraham Heisler, and it's been SpeakuP Monday Inspiring Humanity podcast and live stream. So look, if you want any more information about Brother Abe, just get in touch with me. The details will be below or above, wherever they sit. And again, if you want to know more, just get in touch with me, and I'll be happy to connect as much or in whichever way we need to. And in the meantime, just keep watching out for the next one that will be coming. And SpeakuP Monday, remember, is filmed live here in Indonesia with a little live studio audience. And we have the Clubhouse room, which is on Tuesday morning Bali time, Monday like early to late afternoon US time. And of course, you're going to have these Inspiring Humanity podcasts, which just pop up as we do them every week. So Brother Abe, I just want to acknowledge you, man, for really bringing it, and for going to the other place, which is where I love to go. I think there's so much value going to the other place, as opposed to just repeating things that we say in every single other podcast, right? Because I want to know you, and I want people to get to know how amazing you are, which I think you absolutely are, and know you to be. So I really want to thank you and acknowledge you for going there with me today. All right, brother? So my man, over to you.
Yeah. Robert, there's two types of people in this world. There's vacuum cleaners that suck energy because they're not giving what they need. The self-esteem, love, security, all of that, they're not giving it to themselves, and so they suck it from an external source. And then there's people like yourself, fire hoses, who are so filled with joy, happiness, love, that they just splatter everything in their sight. And I think the sort of final version, or like you watch Dragon Ball Z, and it's like Goku charges up and then it goes crazy. I think the final version, or like the he's on fire version, is being a flamethrower, which means that you're able to just like shoot out into the world and serve, but at the same time you can bring the heat when it's necessary. You can burn shit down that's been blocking people for way too long. So I'm happy to know you, brother. I'm really glad to be connected. Let's melt some wax together and keep the conversation going.
Thank you, my brother. Thanks so much, Brother Abe.